Good morning. Thanks for spending some of your Thanksgiving week with us. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe's off this morning. Let's get started with the holiday travel rush. So the TSA says it is preparing for the busiest Thanksgiving period on record. It expects nearly 3 million people to pass through airport security. That's just today alone. While all travel numbers are up this year, AAA says the bulk of travelers, it's more than 70 million people, are expected to drive to their holiday destination. Cities with warmer weather, that's a popular pick this year. However, two brewing storm systems could potentially put a damper on celebrations in a big part of the country. Forecasters predict heavy rain for parts of the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and much of the East Coast over the next few days. We have meteorologist Angie Lassman standing by. She's going to tell us everything we need to know about the forecast. We also have AAA spokesperson Aixa Diaz. She's here with some tips for drivers, but we're going to get started with NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton. She is live for us at one of the biggest rail hubs in the Northeast. That's Penn Station right here in New York City. Antonia, good morning. Even when it's not 2 days to Thanksgiving, Penn Station is one of the craziest places to be in New York City. It is one of the busiest train stations in the whole U.S. What's it like this morning?
Good morning, Savannah. You know what? It's actually pretty good this morning. And a lot of the people behind me here, these are the early birds, the people who are intentionally getting on the 6 and 7 a.m. trains because they want to avoid that crush and the kinds of delays that can build up later in the day here. But I actually just ran into our colleague, Stephanie Rule. She is one of the early train travelers this time. She's planning to take a 10-hour train to Canada with her family. And things are running really smoothly right now as people try to get ahead of that holiday crush. Amtrak has made some adjustments as well to make sure that they're ready in this region and others, bringing additional trains online. Kathy Hochul, the governor here in New York, announcing that the Empire service throughout New York is back just in time for the holidays. So that means, you know, the weather can always mess things up for trains, but it's looking pretty good so far, Savannah.
Okay, Antonia, a 10-hour train? What is Steph Rule doing? That is hilarious, and it's so funny that you ran into her.
We were all like, wait, what?
Okay, that's a choice. Well, more than 2 million people are expected to travel by train, as you're seeing there, bus, which also leaves from Penn Station. Cruises, those are also a popular, I'm not really sure, we keep calling them a mode of transportation. I feel like it's kind of more like a vacation choice for Thanksgiving this year, but that's a huge jump compared to just 5 years ago before the pandemic. What do we think is behind the spike of so many people choosing to travel during this time?
Well, Savannah, cruises are driving a whole lot of that, and the spike is about 9% up from last year, but almost 20% up over where we were right before the pandemic, so 2019. And I think this is a reflection of people being really eager to get out there to try new holiday experiences like cruises or like really long, strange train rides like the Rule family. And that's something that experts really celebrate. It certainly takes some people off of the roads, which can be really, really stressful, but also potentially dangerous for drivers in the early mornings, in the evenings after work before the holidays. And so right now, having 2.3 or so million people choose buses, trains, and cruises instead, that's in a way incredibly welcome news, Savannah.
Yeah. I hope Steph hears about this conversation we're having about her plans. It's so funny. If people are planning to take a train or bus, what can they do to try and avoid any delays or hiccups? It's not quite like at the airport, you know, when at TSA, if you make sure your water bottles and your laptops are out, it's faster. It's not exactly like that with a train. What is helpful?
A few things will be helpful. The first is, you know, make sure that you have foods, snacks, supplies with you. You can buy them at all of these train stations, but sometimes the lines to get just your snacks can be longer than to get onto your train. So keep that in mind, especially if you're traveling with small children and you know they're going to need that. Of course, you can buy them on the train, but you'll get better prices off of the trains. And then think about your timing here. If you, for some reason, haven't booked your holiday plans yet, tomorrow is going to be tough, the day right before Thanksgiving. And then when you're planning to make your way back to work, back home, you know, Sunday, expect some long lines, some crushes, some waiting, and potentially some delays. That is the day when virtually everyone is trying to head back from Thanksgiving, and it is the singular day that is the most busy, especially on trains during the holiday season, Savannah.
All right, Antonia Hilton from Penn Station for us. Thank you very much. Well, Aixa Diaz is here to help explain what you need to know before you travel for the holiday. She's a spokesperson for AAA, so we can dig in on what's going to be happening on all these roads with 71.7 million people traveling by car. We know AAA is predicting this. I mean, is that also record-breaking for us? And I know that this represents an increase also over pre-pandemic numbers. What do you think it is behind this trend, just like Antonio was talking about with people hopping on cruises and stuff, with so many people driving, and put in context just how big those numbers are?
It is a record, Savannah. So we're breaking records across the board with the overall amount of people traveling, but also in just that auto category, nearly 72 million drivers. You know, people enjoy road trips because they afford flexibility, right? You can leave whenever you want, come back whenever you want. And in many cases, it's just cheaper than flying, especially if you have a big family. The problem this week is a couple of things. As you know, we've got the weather in certain parts of the country. So you want to be mindful of the forecast. Let's say you already had your plan in place and you had your heart set on leaving on Thursday, for example, like I did. I am practicing what I preach. I initially was going to leave on Thursday morning, but I'm here in DC. It's going to be bad weather on Thursday, so I'm adjusting my plans and leaving tomorrow. People have to be flexible if they're driving because we are anticipating an additional 1 million people on the roads this Thanksgiving.
Oh, just 1 million. Ay, my goodness. Okay, let's get practical. You just kind of touched on this, especially in the context of some of these storms that we're hearing about. But when is the best time for people to hit the road? What's a good rule of thumb?
I mean, typically it would be Tuesday and Wednesday, first thing in the morning. So don't wait until the afternoon hours because today in the afternoon, tomorrow in the afternoon, that's when traffic builds. Typically, Thanksgiving Day itself, Thursday morning would be the best time to hit the road because that's when the least amount of people are out driving. The problem is if you are in an area where there is expected to be severe weather on Thursday or a lot of rain, wind, ice, snow, AAA always says, don't drive. That is the safest tip. Don't be on the roads when there is that type of weather. But if you're planning your vehicle now, make sure you check the tire pressure, your oil, your battery. Pack an emergency kit that has extra water, blankets if you're in an area that's cold, snacks, flashlight flares, anything that you would need in case of a roadside emergency. Last Thanksgiving, Savannah, AAA responded to more than 500,000 calls from people stranded on the roadside. And that was everything from flat tires, dead batteries, people locking themselves out of their vehicle and running out of gas.
Jeez Louise, let's try to avoid any of those types of things. Plan to be as safe as possible. What should drivers do maybe before they leave to try to make sure their trip is as safe as possible? Kind of a related question, but what are some reminders?
Well, also check the forecast of where you're going. I think sometimes we're oblivious and we're packing and we're getting ready and getting the kids from school and you're in the zone that you don't actually pay attention to not only the weather where you are, but also along your route. So be mindful if you're on a road trip and you're going through multiple states, what's the weather going to be like along the route so you can prepare for that? And also fill up the tank the night before. Don't wait until the morning of or just say, oh, I'll just fill up along the way. The good news is that gas prices have been coming down. We're paying less than we were this time last Thanksgiving. The national average is getting very close to $3 a gallon. We're not quite there yet, but at least half the country is paying under $3. And going into December, Savannah, we do expect gas demand to go down. That brings gas prices down, and demand comes down when it's colder weather. Also, more people work remotely over the holidays, and a lot of people do their holiday shopping online now. They don't go in the stores, so they're not driving as much.
There you go. Let's talk about the nearly 6 million travelers who are expected to fly. We know the usual, get there early, make sure you don't have those liquids, those laptops in your carry-on luggage, but what else can people do to try to make their airport journey as stress-free as possible, knowing that we're also probably going to break some TSA records this week?
And ideally, you would want somebody to drop you off at the airport so you don't have to worry about parking. But if you do have to park, reserve parking ahead of time. Do it now. A lot of garages may already be full. So reserving parking ahead of time at least gives you one less thing to worry about in the morning. You do want to get there 2 hours early, not only because of all the TSA lines and the security stuff at the airport, but also just traffic going into airports. So many major airports now are undergoing expansions. They have construction. So there's a lot of traffic just going into the airport. So keep that in mind. And I always advise, don't check a bag. Try to pack as light as possible, especially if you have a connection. Because if there's a cancellation, and let's say you're in your layover city and you checked your bag and you don't know where your suitcase is, that's a problem.
Aixa Diaz, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Happy Thanksgiving. Safe travels on your drive today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, now
Happy
for what to expect weather-wise in your area this holiday week and those dual storm systems that we keep mentioning. Let's get a closer look at your Morning News Now weather. Angie Lastman is here to tell us how it could impact our travel. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Hi, Savannah. Good morning to you. We've got those two storm systems that we're going to be closely watching over the next couple of days. The middle of the country, that's where the good news is. You're not looking at a whole lot right now, at least for the time being. The East Coast, you're seeing some of this rain working through. This this is going to be something that will leave you with potentially a little bit of a difficult commute this morning. It's a quick round of rain, though. We'll see maybe some higher elevation snow as well as some ice for interior portions of New England. But out west, we're gearing up for another storm system that's going to slowly but surely cross the country and move coast to coast and be quite impactful on its way. Here's that first system across the east. There's the ice and snow, a couple of slick spots, again, interior New England areas, and the I-95 corridor, a little wet this morning. That's going to slow you down, even if you're still headed off to work, or if you're, of course, headed elsewhere for your holiday plans. Meanwhile, out west, we've got the winter alerts up across parts of the Rockies and the Sierra Range, and those are those alerts that are gearing up for the impacts that we'll see from that system out west that I showed you. Here's today. That storm system works its way into parts of the Rockies. We'll still deal with some of that rain across California, as well as some of those mountains picking up some additional snowfall. And the Rockies is where it's going to be a little bit difficult when it comes to travel today. So Salt Lake City and Denver, those are a couple of trouble spots. But even Las Vegas, LA, and San Diego, you could see some difficulty, too, with some of those showers working into Southern California. That storm system, we're not going to be done with it just yet. We're going to watch that redevelop here as it gets east of the Rockies. That means rain, snow, really ramping up across parts of the Tennessee Valley and the Midwest as we get into tomorrow. So even into the evening hours tomorrow, Chicago, Detroit, Nashville, potential delays. But check out Kansas City and St. Louis. Those are going to be a better chance that we could see some of those delays. And across Texas, we'll see some windy conditions. So the possibility for Dallas, Houston, and Austin to see some delays also. On the roads, I-75, I-64 all have the potential to see some wet roads and a little bit of a slower go, especially considering we could see some snow and maybe ice across that region too. And as we get into Thanksgiving, all that moves into the East Coast. We've got rain and inland snow to deal with as it works across the Northeast. This will be an impactful Thanksgiving, Savannah, on the roads and in the air as far as the East Coast is concerned with that system moving in.
All right. And safe drive, safe planning for everybody
Exactly.
ahead with that weather. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy belated birthday,
Oh,
Angie.
thank you. You're so
See you in
sweet.
a little bit. Well, this morning we are learning new details about President-elect Donald Trump's plans for new tariffs when he takes office. In a social media post last night, Mr. Trump announced he would put new tariffs on imported goods from Mexico, Canada, and China. That's fulfilling a campaign promise, and it could have a major impact on trade and on the economy. The announcement comes as special counsel Jack Smith moved to drop all federal charges against the president-elect. This is regarding his handling of classified documents and his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election that culminated with the January 6th attack on the Capitol. For more, we are joined by NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard. He covers the Trump transition for us, and NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Good morning to both of you, Von. Let's get started with you. So President-elect Trump's plans to enact new tariffs on imported goods. He's framing this as a response to illegal immigration and the ongoing fentanyl crisis. But what is he proposing? Explain the connection there and what kind of impact this could ultimately have on everyday Americans and our wallets.
Right. It could have a major impact. Let's be very clear. He is suggesting that the U.S. and his White House will put a 25% tariff on all goods coming from our two largest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. That is everything from agricultural goods to auto manufacturing. This is a proposal from Donald Trump that could have major impacts. He's also proposing a 10% additional tariff on all Chinese goods coming into the United States. This effectively amounts to a tax. And what economists predict is that you would see your goods that come in from overseas, the price at the store be increased. And for Donald Trump, he has made the case that it'll be worth it in the end, that it'll help fill up the coffers to pay for goods and services in the United States. But we went through a trade war back in 2018 and 2019 when Donald Trump levied tariffs on China, Mexico, Canada, and other European allies. And what we saw was a drop in the commodity prices of everything from lobsters to corn and soybean to other manufactured goods because there were retaliatory tariffs that were placed on U.S. exports. So there were markets that were cut off in which U.S., again, just use corn farmers, for example, weren't able to sell their corn overseas to places like China because they had stopped in retaliation buying American goods because America placed tariffs on their exported goods. And so this is some of the concern of economists about the ultimate impact that it would have on the economy. Yet Donald Trump has made the case that that sort of bold tariff strategy would increase U.S. domestic manufacturing and be able to put the U.S. in a long-term position to better compete compete with the overseas producers.
Vaughn, I do also want to touch on something else really quickly while we've got you. Some inner turmoil from the Trump transition team. This is from the New York Times. They're reporting a top Trump aide is being accused of asking for money to promote potential cabinet appointees. What can you tell us about this?
Right. I am told that there was a review that was that took place within this Trump transition team that reviewed the contracts and the agreements of all of their top advisors. The reporting from the New York Times is that Boris Epshteyn, who is one of Donald Trump's top advisors, but also his senior counsel, he helped oversee the lawyer teams for each of his criminal indictments, that Boris Epshteyn had essentially gone to different individuals and suggested that he could consult for them, and in turn, by doing that, promote them internally within Trump world ahead of potentially being named to cabinet or top administrative posts. Boris Epshteyn, in a statement, told NBC News that he has done effectively no wrongdoing and that he looks forward to continuing on with the Trump transition team. And so Boris Epshteyn is one of those close, rare advisors that has been around for the last 9 years throughout Donald Trump's political reign. And so I think it calls into question potentially some internal strife in Trump world, which they have largely been able to avoid for the last 2 years. But this all comes at a time in which there are many people that are vying for these top cabinet and administrative posts. Savannah.
All right, Brian, let's bring you in here. Walk us through the decision here from special counsel to drop the 2 federal cases against the president-elect.
Yeah, so if you rewind a few years, you may remember from the Mueller probe, this was a major factor that came up. There's this Office of Legal Counsel opinion that says that the sitting president cannot be charged, cannot be tried. And so that's what Jack Smith's team was running up against here, because, of course, there wasn't even really a trial date on the books, and this was all sort of paused. But you can't put the sitting president of the United States on trial, according to this longstanding Office of Legal Counsel memo from within the Justice Department. So essentially, following that policy, they said, we're dropping this case now because there's no chance that this goes to trial, obviously, in the next, say, 60 days, or even, whether you could put the president-elect on trial is a separate sort of question. So that's sort of where things stand and the reason that they dropped it. But I think Jack Smith made abundantly clear that this was not based on the merits at all of the prosecution. And of course, they wouldn't have brought the prosecution unless they thought that they could convince a jury of 12 of Donald Trump's peers that he was guilty of these 4 federal crimes. Trump, of course, has proclaimed his innocence and said that he is not guilty of those crimes, but they were confident that they could have gotten this over the line. And of course, they did convince federal grand jurors that there was enough probable cause to return an indictment against him for his efforts to overturn the election back in 2020, Savannah.
Ryan, you touched on this, but, even before getting to this point of the move to actually drop these charges, it got more complicated with that Supreme Court ruling over the summer that determined presidents have immunity from prosecution on some official acts. How did that play into this?
Yeah, I was speaking with our colleague Lauren Turley yesterday, and if you step back for a moment, Donald Trump actually emerges from the entire investigation with Jack Smith, basically with this Supreme Court decision in his back pocket that is going to make sure that he is less accountable for whatever happens during his presidency. In fact, not accountable at all, because you ended up with that Supreme Court ruling that gives him immunity for all official acts as president. So basically where the rubber is going to hit the road on accountability is figuring out where those lines are for people at the Justice Department, for his own appointees, because they are still theoretically a subject or target of potential prosecution if they violate their constitutional oaths. And if they obey an unconstitutional order from Trump, that's something that they could theoretically be held accountable for. But, basically the scenario we're walking into is that Donald Trump is walking in with a pathway and a guidance to do a lot of what he wants to do when he becomes president.
Big news here. Ryan Riley and Vaughn Hilliard, thank you both very much. Let's stay on this now. Bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, good morning. Great to have you with us. And we, of course, have to get your take on this. What are the big takeaways for you seeing this move to drop these charges of what was this historic prosecution of Mr. Trump?
In a way, they were inevitable. These federal cases were going to go away one way or another. So then the question becomes, what is the symbolic message that Jack Smith wanted to send? And I think there's a lot in his filings that you can read between the lines. There are two words that appear repeatedly in both filings in Atlanta and in the D.C. case, and they are without prejudice.
Yeah.
That means when you dismiss a case without prejudice, in theory, it can be brought again. But let's get real. It's never going to be brought again, certainly not by Jack Smith. Nothing is going to happen after Donald Trump is inaugurated. So theoretically, while they could be brought again, they never will be. And so that, plus the fact that Jack Smith is pursuing or stating that he plans to pursue the appeal against Trump's co-defendants in Florida in that documents case, shows that another symbolic statement that he plans to pursue an appeal against two co-defendants who will almost certainly have their cases dismissed when Trump takes office, because these people were very loyal to him. They were his co-defendants in the documents case. So a lot of messaging in there that if you read between the lines, you get a real feel for where Jack Smith stands.
We love when you make predictions for us. They are typically right, I will point out.
Mostly wrong.
No, I actually don't think they are.
Okay.
Is that true?
Yeah,
No.
I'm not tracking.
But why? Explain your confidence that even after his second term is finished, that this will not come back.
I go with the too many barriers to name reasoning in saying that this case will not be brought again. First of all, you're assuming, he has 4 years. Then you possibly could get another 8 years of a Republican presidency. And I seriously doubt any Republican president is going to be interested in having his or her DOJ continue a prosecution against Donald Trump. So there's that possibility. You run into statutes of limitations issues. You run into additional constitutional issues. You run into the same immunity issues that we have dealing with right now. Consider this. The Florida case is currently dismissed. It's dead even before Jack Smith declined to pursue the appeal. So if it's dismissed on the same case law in 4 years, it's still dismissed. Same thing in D.C. I wouldn't say D.C. was on the ropes, but at this point, Judge Chutkan was considering what parts of the immunity decision apply and which don't. So it's possible that case could have gone away. There are just too many off-ramps, and so my Danny Savalas Vegas odds, therefore, are calculated that the odds are strongly, strongly against this case ever being brought in any form.
Could he issue some type of report, or is there any way that we could ever find out, what this evidence was that a grand jury has seen, since this will now not play out? Could we get any of that information?
Well, yes, the special counsel does issue a report, but when you think about it, this is a case where there's really not that much left to our curiosity. Jack Smith has had to file in court, because of the immunity decision and other things, entire briefs that lay out his entire case. That's the kind of thing you really never get in a federal case, this kind of showing of the hand before the case is brought to trial. So in many ways, other than the classified documents case, when we're talking about the actual classified documents and the secrets contained within, we really have never gotten this kind of look at what the case was going to involve. So some we may never find out, but even if there is a report issued, we've already learned most of it through the filings that have been made public.
Danny Savalas, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.